Assalamu alaikum, I'm Carl Arundel and you're watching the Tower Hamlets election special in focus. Now I'm delighted to be joined today by the Conservative Party Tower Hamlets mayoral candidate Chris Wilford. Chris Wilford is a resident in the borough and currently works in public policy for the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. He was formerly a senior policy and public affairs advisor for the Recruitment and Employment Confederation and has also worked as a parliamentary researcher for Lord Lingfield, where he was involved in educational reform issues in the House of Lords. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Wilford, and welcome to Islam Channel.
Hi there, good to join you.
You've openly indicated that you have issues with the way the existing mayor, Lutfur Rahman, runs his affairs in the borough. Particularly, you've mentioned issues relating to the abuse of expenses, personal transport, self-promotion at the taxpayer's expense. And you've said that you're tired, to use your words, of the stories of cronyism and waste. Do you believe that the allegations of impropriety, lack of transparency and accountability presented by John Weir in his BBC Panorama documentary last month are in any way justified?
First of all, I'd like to assure your viewers that my picture will not be everywhere should I be elected as the mayor. I know that has been quite a controversial topic with a lot of people. Look, I think the real issue at the heart of this is how resources are being used effectively in Tower Hamlets. This is a borough where we've got facing some of the highest levels of child poverty in the United Kingdom. We've got massive issues in terms of helping people find work and jobs. And in that kind of environment, is it appropriate that the mayor has an office that costs over £500,000 a year? We're spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on corporate lobbyists in order to improve the image of the town hall. And then there were the stories about the chauffeur-driven car and all that sort of thing. Is it appropriate that resources are being used like that, or should they be used to tackle some of the challenges we face? So for me, that is the issue. The Panorama show's gained a lot of publicity and a lot of things. That is a matter for that show and ongoing issues there. But for me, the real question is, how are resources being used in this borough?
Now, when you mention Tower Hamlets to most people across the United Kingdom, they will immediately think of the Olympics because of its recent event in our history. Many people have suggested that the mayor could have made better use of the resources and the opportunity that was presented by the Olympics. What is your feeling about this, and do you think it was handled correctly, and how different would your handling have been?
Well, I mean, it was a great blow to the pride of the borough that the marathon route got rerouted, for instance. I think it was a missed opportunity. I think we could have done more with the eyes of the world on London, emphasising the role of Tower Hamlets and the Old East End, sort of being involved in that, and the multicultural environment we're in, and celebrating that on the international stage. I think we could have done more of that. I think we could have allowed more of our youngsters to have access to the jobs there. And I think we could have looked at more how we can get our slice of the pie in terms of the housing and other things that boroughs of Newham have done with the Olympic legacy.
Do you put the blame for that in the court of the incumbent mayor?
I think the mayor did have a role in that. He could have done more. But I actually think it's symptomatic of a wider issue in this borough, that we've got decades of neglect in Tower Hamlets. The likes of Labour and now Rahman, they have taken people for granted. They have kind of put things through, and though progress has been made in certain areas, such as education, in other areas like the Olympics and other things, this borough is missing out. And we think it's time to put in a long-term plan, working with residents to make sure their voice is heard, and also fight very sort of hard on the national stage to try and get a fairer deal for residents and make sure when these big projects, such as the Olympics, come, we are getting our fair slice of the pie. So I think yes, there is a role to play, but it's also part of a wider story in Tower Hamlets.
Now, the borough generally has seen a proliferation of luxury housing developments and very little in the way of affordable housing. Indeed, with caps on housing benefit and the so-called bedroom tax, many families who have been resident in the borough for generations have been forced to move out of the borough. There was a documentary, I think, only last week on the television about how to get a council house, and it seemed to suggest that the only way these days as well for people to remain in the borough was with some emergency subsidy from the council. The incumbent mayor has pledged to build 5,500 new council homes over the next 4 years. Your supporters have indicated that there's a bit of an objection to what they refer to as ever higher tower blocks. What are your plans for creating affordable housing in the borough and for finding ways to ensure that indigenous population are not forced to move out.
Or missing out. Yes.
Well, Ms. Gay, I think you've famously said that you intend to make housing work. Please tell me what that means.
Housing that works is a central issue, as well as you touched on some of the aspects about the politics, the nature of politics in Tower Hamlets. That is one of the big issues in this election. The other big issue is housing and development. Without a doubt, that is again and again on the doorstep what you hear. So in your first part of your question there, I think you were referring to the spare room subsidy. The spare room subsidy, it has been a measure, and we've actually done a freedom of information request because there were some quite hysterical reports about how it was having an impact on residents. We did a freedom of information request. They said 8,000 tenants were going to have to leave the borough. We identified that none have left the borough, and actually only 160 people have been impacted upon by that measure so far. Now, as part of a wider story, affordable housing, we do need to get it in this borough. So if we look at areas like the Community Land Trust in Mile End, I think that's a model that I would like to see more of, identifying sites where we can put in affordable housing, increase the supply side of issues so people can get their fair crack at the whip and get that housing there. However, as well as the need to increase supply, we've also got to be conscious that we're very densely populated here. And it's very well saying I'm going to build 5,500 new flats, but where am I going to put them? And where is the infrastructure to support that development? So where are the doctors' surgeries? Where are the schools? And where are the roads that are going to be able to cope with that extra influx? So my message is not anti-development, it's development with a plan, and also making sure we're involving local residents in that decision-making process. So I can sit here and say, as the mayor, I'm going to put 5,500 houses here, and this is where they're going to go, make a grand joint judgment. I think, actually, no, we need to take a step back, take a full stop, and have an open consultation over a 3-month period with all residents and businesses in the borough and talk to them, where do you think development should go? What do you think should happen here? And based on those results, I would rewrite the local development framework. And as part of this wider process, another area we would look at is making sure we bring local planning committees back to the ward level. So people are heavily involved in this development process and making sure that it is delivering for those who need houses, those who are in the area and seeing their area develop, but also making sure we're not scared of the borough evolving and making sure that more people who come for work and other things, we've got the capacity to deal with them in a sustainable manner.
So let me get this clear. You're in favour of decentralising the government of the borough, and also, can I just get clarification, are you against the subsidy for the welfare caps, the bedroom tax as we called it, or do you see a need for it? I mean, you mentioned that you'd sought some figures, but maybe the smaller numbers are a result of the subsidies.
Well, I think capacity and supply are intrinsically linked here. So I would say this government at a national level inherited one of the worst economic deficits we've seen in recent times, and tough decisions have been taken in order to combat that. Now, you mentioned earlier people aren't having their fair crack at the whip in terms of housing. Well, in that way, then, you've got to make sure the housing we have got, whilst we look at new ways where we can build, we are maximising that capacity and making sure people who may not need an extra room, we are making sure a family who does need that extra room are getting it. So I appreciate the emotions involved in it, but we've had to deal with this deficit, we've had to take the decisions there, and also we now need to look at how we can get sustainable housing to cope. So I think it was a necessary measure we needed to do. With regards to decentralisation, what I am saying is I'm not necessarily decentralising everything, but making sure local people are involved in the decision at the moment and their voice is at that central table. At the moment, I think that's lacking.
So just to go back to this one point, do you or do you not support subsidising, providing an emergency subsidy for those people who are facing the prospect of being pushed out of the borough?
People are not being pushed out of the borough. What my focus of my administration on will be looking at how we can get extra supply in the borough and building more houses for people in a sustainable way involving existing residents with that decision.
All right, I will allow you to move on that question. A raft of national studies have pointed out the levels of poverty in Tower Hamlets as being amongst the highest in the country. In fact, several of the reports suggest that Tower Hamlets is the highest in the country in terms of poverty, especially amongst young children. Yet, it is home also to some of the greatest wealth, especially in the business district of Canary Wharf. Are you proposing any measures to mitigate this disparity? I mean, I suggested in an earlier conversation potentially a one-off levy imposed on the business district. Do you have any proposals or plans that could possibly address this?
Yes. First of all, I think there's two aspects to this. First of all is making sure we're managing our existing resources effectively, as I touched on earlier, making sure we're reducing waste and we can channel resources to where they're needed most. The second one is making sure we have the viable policies in place and the commitment to ensure that all our local residents can share in hard-won economic growth. At the national level, this Conservative-led government has now delivered the highest growth rate in the G7. We've now delivered 450,000 private sector jobs last year. Why is it that Tower Hamlets still has some of the highest levels of unemployment in London? We need to make sure that we are promoting the policies that give people the access to jobs that will ultimately take them out of poverty. And we're doing measures at a national level that are delivering for people. So, for instance, this Conservative-led government is taking people out the first £10,000 of income tax, meaning they have more cash in their pocket. But in tandem with that national level and making sure people can access jobs and develop, we need to make sure resources are being spent effectively. So, for instance, East End Life costs £3.1 million a year. I was speaking to a homeless man called Tango on Brick Lane the other day, and I was talking to him in detail about how we needed to get people like him that first step on the ladder, the first step into housing. Why is it in a borough with those high levels of poverty we are spending £3.1 million a year on a magazine when we should be helping people like Tango? So I think it's about how we can access that national level and make sure we are sharing the proceeds of growth, but at the local level, making sure we're spending every pound of taxpayers' money in an effective way to make sure that it is working for residents and tackling those issues.
It's interesting you mentioned East End Life. I know that for the first time since the incumbent mayor was elected, he was halted in his plans to expand the budget on the East End Life for what he argued, and many others have argued, was an essential organ of communication in the borough. I mean, your counterparts and colleagues in the Conservative Party on the council were able to join forces with Labour and put a stop to his plans, although it's a very difficult process to have brought about, as they need a 2/3 majority. Do you believe that the magazine should be done away with altogether, or do you think that perhaps it should just simply have less pictures of the mayor in it?
I mean, with this issue, as with so many others, Labour are dilly-dallying around the subject. I'm not sure if you can get a firm commitment or answer from them, but we are committed to scrapping East End Life. We think resources can be spent in a more effective manner, and that's what we're committed to doing.
Now, you talked about empowerment. You talked about the sad reality that many people in the borough are not in employment.
Yes,
despite the fact that we have so much wealth here.
Yeah.
In fact, there are far too many professionals who are being sort of shipped in to the district. At the heart of empowerment is education. Now, there was a report published last year called Transforming Education for All, the Tower Hamlets story, which was produced by 3 respected educational academics. And it seems to suggest that Tower Hamlets was a huge success story, that it now produces some of the best urban schools in the world, and that's in stark conflict with the situation back in 1997 when it was regarded as the worst. Do you think that the incumbent mayor can take any credit for that? And I know you've argued that there should be a lot more schools built in the borough, and there's been a failing in that area. And you suggest that the council currently spends £1 million a year on taxis and buses to transport children from one corner of the borough to the other. What, in your understanding, are the alternative solutions?
Yes, so if we take the first point there, credit where credit is due, there has been real progress in schools in the borough, and we can be rightly proud of what our schools are achieving up to the age of 16. I think that is a long-term issue, and the current administration has kind of sat back and a bit of complacency set in that we could be doing even more. But there has been achievements there. However, I think post-16, There is a real problem there in helping people transition into the workplace. I think we need to have a focus on that from a mayoral level, saying how can we make sure that our youngsters who've come through these very good schools, outstanding schools on occasion, at 16, how are they transitioning effectively so they're sharing in the proceeds of growth, getting the jobs in Canary Wharf, getting on, getting ahead. How can we do that? How can we focus on that? So I think we need to make sure we're spending resources effectively and working as well with leading employers in the borough. So making sure that we've got an open door to some of the larger employers in Canary Wharf and in the north of the borough as well, making sure that we're working with them to deliver a landmark growth strategy for jobs, making sure we've got these youngsters coming through the system. How can we work with you now to make sure that they can occupy the space and get on there? So I think that post-16 period. I also think lifelong learning. I mean, I go out to a lot of places and you speak to people. You go, yeah, we're going to do this for young people. We're going to help them get the jobs because we think there's real scope for that. And, someone will stick up their hand, they're 40, and they go, what about me? I've got this skill set. I feel frozen out of the market. What are we going to do? So I think also we need to look at, say, well, actually education as well is about lifelong learning, and it is for me. I'm very passionate about lifelong learning. So how can I work with the leading employers to make sure there's strategies there to help people who've developing skill sets earn extra skills and go into the system? So that's what I want to do, that post-16 focus, support our schools for doing the great job they're doing at the moment, keep more of that, but have a look at some of those areas where I think more could be done. With regards to ferrying people around and that £1 million issue, that gets to the heart of a real problem we've got in this borough, in that by 2024 we're going to need 14,000 extra school places. Where are we going to put them? Where are we going to have that? We need to start thinking now about where we get those schools. So I'd be working with existing free schools and academies, supporting them, supporting the development of more of that, to see where we can get that extra provision. And as a result of that extra provision, not have to spend a small fortune on ferrying youngsters around to their schools. So I think it's looking at some of those areas where we're still lacking, and then also making sure we're attacking the real issue here, which is how can we deliver those extra school places.
And you think free schools may be the answer, do you?
I think they're part of the solution.
Now, I want to move on to a subject which has been the subject of some controversy over the last while, which is the abolition by your colleagues in Parliament, the Conservative Party and Lib Dem coalition government, of the educational maintenance allowance, EMMA as it's been referred to. It was countered in this borough by huge local subsidies instigated by the incumbent mayor from the council's budget. In your opinion, was that a good thing? Do you think it was a mistake of government to have abolished the allowance in the first place?
Look, we needed to tackle this deficit, and we were going to have to go on tackling the deficit. We needed to take tough decisions, and scrapping EMA was one of those solutions. What I would say as the mayor is my real focus would be looking at how we can get jobs, part-time jobs, in the area so youngsters at 16 can get that to support them in their studies. When I was 16, I managed to get a job working in an industrial freezer. That helped me pay my way through the sixth form to study, balance my studies and work hard and get on. How can we deliver extra jobs to help people? That said, maybe there is scope as well to look at how we can deliver maybe a means-tested element for people who are the hardest hit. So I think get jobs for the majority, help them, support them through their studies to get that extra bit on there. But then also make sure there's means tested, so helping children spend their EMA a means tested fund, effectively on where it's needed. So school books, subsidies, that sort of thing. So there would be a mayoral education fund, but I don't agree with wholesale subsidy.
Now, your campaign literature suggests that Rahman refuses consistently to answer questions at council meetings. His spending priorities are deeply unpopular, you say. Which spending priorities do you think they're referring to, and where would they differ from yours?
Well, I think chauffeurs, the size of the mayoral office, the lobbyists and all that sort of thing. I think we're not delivering a good deal for residents at the moment. I think they're spending too much on frippery, not enough on the real issues we face in the borough. I mean, the first day, if I was elected as the mayor, I'd be taking a £10,000 pay cut. I'd be scrapping East End Life. I'd be reducing the size of the mayoral office. I'd be scrapping the lobbyist funding. And with that money, as well as delivering all my commitments, I would also deliver a 5.7% council tax cut to residents worth £50 a year per household. So that would give them a direct...
Can the borough afford such?
We can, yes. Yeah, we've got a fully costed alternative budget where we channel, making sure we're spending all our resources effectively, making sure we're meeting commitments like free school meals, and then making sure that actually, yes, residents, here's a bit more bang for your buck. This is what responsible government looks like, and this is what we want to do in Tower Hamlets.
Now, your campaign literature also alleges that the mayor has fostered, and I'm quoting it, a broken, divisive and unpleasant local political culture. You say under Mayor Rahman, Tower Hamlets Council has become a national scandal. Do you think that there's any sense to the allegations of impropriety and lack of accountability and transparency?
I think people feel cut off from the system at the moment. They hear of all this going on, and the fact is, at all the mayoral hustings I've done so far, Mayor Rahman hasn't showed up. I haven't had the chance to engage with him. So I know there's all these allegations in the air and that sort of thing, but really I think a lot of people want to hear from the mayor. I want to sit down opposite the mayor and discuss my plan, discuss his plan, and then maybe see which residents want to choose out of that. I mean, what it is, it's all about accountability for me and making sure you are visible to residents. So the first thing I would do if I was mayor, I'd make all councillors and myself would sign a transparency and integrity pledge, making sure all our surgeries were available, making sure we're visible, making sure residents know how to access us. Because what I think it is we can talk about what smoke and mirrors and all this sort of thing. I want to hear from the guy. I want to look him in the eyes, talk about what he's doing in the borough, what I want to do, and let's have it out, you know. It's all about visibility for me.
All right, now, there is another issue. There's a lot of column inches and broadcast time has been given to promoting the idea that Tower Hamlets is a hotbed of Islamic fundamentalism, the sort of creeping Islamicisation of the borough. Attacks have been made on locally resident and national, international Muslim umbrella organisations such as the Muslim Council of Britain and the Islamic Forum Europe. Do you share those concerns? Do you think that such attacks simply fail, as has been suggested by some, to understand and respect the traditions and beliefs of the richly diverse community in the borough?
I think, again, this comes back to that smoke and mirrors issue. There's a lot of hearsay around, there's a lot of what's going on here. There's a lack of visibility from the mayor and others that is feeding this suspicion about what is going on. What we need now is a positive long-term plan for the borough where it is clear we're all moving together as one community, working together to build a better borough. We need a fresh start for Tower Hamlets based on accountability, credibility and efficiency.
Now finally, Chris, it is fair to say that the Conservative Party historically, at least, has not had huge prospect of winning an election in this part of London, although your counterparts in both the Labour Party and other parties have all acknowledged that the demographics are massively and very rapidly changing. Do you see this now making it a very viable and a reasonable expectation that you could win this next election?
Well, first thing I would like to assure your viewers is, as a Conservative in the East End, I've got tough skin. So, you know, I can cope with tough decisions and getting out there with my message. The borough is evolving dramatically. There's no escaping that. We've all seen it around, you know. It's changing at a huge pace. But actually, a lot of our support, and the Isle of Dogs is a case in point where we have 7 Conservative councillors currently delivering for residents. The Isle of Dogs is a case in point. Many long-term residents here have felt left behind by the incumbent parties here, such as Labour. They feel, oh, they haven't been delivering for me. What is the alternative? They've taken a chance on the Conservatives. We're actually drawing a lot of our support from people who've been in this borough a very long time and who now think, actually, these guys haven't delivered for me over decades. I now want a fresh start. Who are the people that have been working flat out for me, such as our hard-working councillors, who are actually doing casework right across the borough? They're saying, who's working hard for me? I'm going to go with the Conservatives, and I like their message.
Chris Wilford, Conservative Tower Hamlets mayoral candidate, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
On Islam Channel.
Thank you.